They showed up at my door like it was just another Sunday. My father, my mother, and, of course, my brother. All standing there like a united front. My dad didn't even say hello. He went straight to the point. You need to sell the apartment. Just like that. No warmth, no small talk. And I stood there in my doorway holding a coffee mug I suddenly couldn't feel in my hand anymore. My name is Rachel. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me because I need to ask. Has your family ever made you feel like your only value was what you could give them? Not who you are. Not how hard you work. But just what you can offer. Financially. Emotionally. Over and over again. Until there's nothing left but guilt and silence. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this has ever happened to you, if you've ever been expected to sacrifice just because you were this strong one, I want to hear your story in the comments. Don't keep it bottled up. I looked at my parents and said calmly, "What do you mean?" My mother jumped in. "For your brother's startup. It's important. This time he really has a solid plan." This time. As if I hadn't heard that phrase my entire life. "It's family money anyway," my father added sharply, like that was supposed to make it reasonable. "You wouldn't even have that apartment if it weren't for your aunt. She would have wanted to help him." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I turned around, walked into my kitchen drawer and pulled out an envelope I had prepared weeks ago. I came back to the door, placed it gently into my father's hand, and said, "Then you should read this first." He opened it. And I swear to you, his face turned white as a sheet. He looked down at the envelope like it might explode in his hands. My mother leaned in to peek and my brother, well, he just folded his arms and rolled his eyes like this was all some kind of performance. I said nothing. I just watched the man who once drained my college fund try to find his voice. "What is this?" my father finally muttered. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to read it. I wanted him to see it for what it was. A line. Not revenge. Not drama. Just the moment I stopped pretending I owed them my life. He pulled out the papers. The first page was short. A legal letter from my attorney confirming the ownership of my apartment, bequeathed to me directly and solely from my Aunt June. The woman who raised me more like a daughter than anyone else ever did. The second page. That one was a little heavier. It was a printed statement. Every withdrawal my parents had ever made from the fund Aunt June set aside for my college education. I had found them all, through old records, bank receipts, and quiet conversations with an accountant Aunt June had trusted. Every dollar, every check marked family emergency, all leading straight into my brother's pockets. Loans that were never paid back. Investments that failed. Excuses wrapped in birthdays, holidays, hospital visits, and every manipulation they knew would keep me quiet. My father looked up, jaw tight. "Where did you get these?" "I kept records," I said softly. "Because no one else ever did." My mother narrowed her eyes. "So what is this, Rachel? Punishment? You think just because you have a little apartment now you're better than us?" I looked at her for a long time before I answered. "No. I think I'm done pretending I'm not." The words surprised even me. But they came from somewhere deep, not anger, not pride. Just exhaustion. The kind you carry when you've spent most of your adult life cleaning up someone else's mess while being told you're selfish for saying no. My brother finally spoke. "This is ridiculous. You've always been jealous of me." And there it was, the same broken loop that always played in our family. His failures weren't his fault. My boundaries were betrayal. I was always the problem if I didn't give them everything. But this time I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain myself. I just walked across the room, picked up my mug, still warm, and said, "You can let yourselves out." Then I turned and walked back into the kitchen, my heart pounding, my hands shaking just a little. Because for the first time in years, I had chosen myself. I stood there at the sink, hands wrapped around the mug like it was keeping me anchored. I could hear their muffled voices behind the door, arguing in low tones, probably trying to figure out how I'd suddenly grown a spine. But I wasn't listening to them anymore. I was listening to something else. Something inside me that had stayed quiet for far too long. I've spent most of my life being the responsible one. When we were kids, my brother broke rules, ran wild, chased big dreams with no plans to back them up. And I cleaned up the pieces. Every time he failed, they told me it was just a phase. That he'd find his way. That I should understand because he was trying. But when I needed something, anything, there was always a reason they couldn't be there. I got my first job at 16 not because I wanted independence, but because my college savings had already started disappearing. They said there was a leak in the roof. Then it was a medical bill. Then a loan, just until your brother gets on his feet. They never paid it back. By the time I got into university, the account was empty. I remember the day I opened the portal and saw the final tuition deadline. I called my mom, panicked. Her voice was calm, too calm. "We thought you'd just go to community college instead," she said. "You're practical, Rachel. You'll figure it out." And I did. I worked nights and weekends, took every scholarship I could chase down, and skipped entire semesters to save money. I watched my classmates study in cafes while I scrubbed floors in the biology building. I missed out on so many things that young people are supposed to have, and every time I visited home, I saw a new piece of tech my brother had bought for his business. They always had money for his ideas. Never for my survival. It took me 10 years to finish a degree. 10 years of watching him fail upward while I climbed inch by inch with no rope. And when Aunt June passed, that sweet, stubborn woman who never once treated me like I was second best, she left me something no one else ever did. A home. She left me this apartment. Not a loan. Not a favor. A gift. My name on the deed, her handwriting on the last envelope she ever gave me. For the one who never asked for anything but gave everything anyway. When I moved in, I cried the first night. Not because it was big or fancy, it wasn't. But because it was mine. No conditions. No expectations. Just space that didn't ask me to shrink. I decorated it with old books and second-hand lamps. I kept her favorite tea in the cabinet. I kept her photo on the shelf by the window. And now, they wanted to take this too. Because even after all these years, they still saw me as a resource. But I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was something else now. Something stronger. And I wasn't going to trade that for their approval. Not ever again. They left that afternoon without another word. No hugs, no apologies. Just tense silence and the sound of my front door clicking shut behind them. I watched from the hallway window as they got into the car. My mother shook her head. My brother was already back on his phone. And my father just stared straight ahead like something had cracked inside him. But the thing is, it wasn't about the envelope. It was about the shift. They felt it. For the first time, they realized I wasn't going to play my role anymore. The quiet daughter, the financial fallback, the reliable one who could be guilted into anything with a few sharp words and a reminder that family sticks together. I remember sitting on the couch that night, legs pulled under me, replaying the scene in my head. And not just today, everything. Every ask. Every excuse. Every time they twisted love into obligation. And suddenly it was like something inside me snapped. Not in anger. Not in rage. Just in truth. I was done carrying it. All of it. I was done sacrificing my peace so my brother could have yet another fresh start. Done being told I was the selfish one when all I'd ever done was survive with dignity. Done hearing, "Well, we're family," as a way to excuse their complete disregard for my boundaries. Because love isn't about debt. It's not about how much you can give before you're allowed to say no. It's not about how often you can break yourself into pieces to prove you're loyal. It's not about giving up the life you built, just to keep people comfortable who never made room for you in the first place. I thought about Aunt June. How she'd seen through the games. How she left me that apartment because she knew, deep down, that I needed something in this world that no one could take from me. And I realized, this was never about the apartment. It was about finally saying, enough. The next morning I made a choice. No more silent endurance. No more pretending their treatment was normal. No more justifying their choices at the expense of my own life. I wasn't going to react anymore. I was going to act. The idea for the envelope didn't come to me all at once. It built itself slowly, the way survival instincts do when you've been burned too many times. For a long time I used to wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe I was the problem. That's how it works, you know, they wear you down until you second-guess your own truth. But after Aunt June passed and I saw how quickly my parents circled around the apartment like vultures around fresh meat, I knew I needed to protect what little I had left. That's when I contacted my lawyer. I remember sitting in her office, hands sweating, voice shaking a little as I explained everything. How they had taken my college fund. How my brother's startups were just vanity projects funded by emotional blackmail. How I couldn't go through another cycle of, "We just need one more thing." She didn't blink. She just listened and then said, "We'll draw a boundary they can't cross." She helped me gather records, bank withdrawals, tuition invoices, even a copy of the check my parents had written to themselves from my education savings under the name of a temporary family loan. Everything had a trail. It always does, even when they think they're being subtle. She also filed a legal document affirming the apartment belonged to me exclusively. No one could contest it. It was in Aunt June's will, witnessed and signed. And then finally she helped me write a letter. Not to them but for me. A statement of separation, not from the family, but from the financial expectations that had been wrapped in the word family for far too long. It simply stated, I will no longer participate in financial exchanges that compromise my well-being. My resources are mine to steward, not to surrender. We sealed it all in a plain white envelope. I kept it in my kitchen drawer for weeks. I almost threw it out once. Old habits die hard. The people-pleasing, the guilt, the tiny voice in your head that says, but what if they finally understand this time? But they never do. Not when they're used to you bending. So when they showed up that day and made their demand, I didn't hesitate. I walked to that drawer, pulled out the envelope and handed it to my father, like I was passing off a baton in a race I no longer needed to run. And when he opened it and read the records and saw the final letter, something shifted in his face. He didn't yell. He didn't explode. He just went pale. As if the weight of what he'd done, or maybe what he could no longer do, finally caught up to him. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Because maybe for the first time he saw someone who couldn't be guilt. Someone who had nothing left to lose by saying no. Someone who understood her worth, and was done asking for permission to protect it. He folded the papers back into the envelope with shaking hands and stared down at the table like he was trying to make it disappear. My mother, still standing stiffly beside him, scoffed. Not loudly. Just that sharp little exhale she always used when she didn't know how to respond. You really think this proves something? She said finally, arms crossed. You're going to throw away your family over a few dollars and an old apartment? I looked at her for a long second before answering. Not angry, just tired. I'm not throwing anyone away. I'm keeping what little of me I still have left. She opened her mouth again, probably to launch into one of those, after all we did for you speeches, but I held up my hand. No, I said softly. Not this time. Then came the voice I'd been waiting for. My brother, who had been quietly seething in the corner, stepped forward like he was the one most hurt by all of this. You know what? He said, eyes sharp. You've always resented me. Ever since we were kids. You wanted to be the favorite. You just never had what it took. I didn't flinch. You mean the part where I showed up, cleaned up, paid up and still got ignored? I asked calmly. Yeah. I guess I did want to be seen. He sneered. You're doing this just to hurt us. Admit it. No, I said again, more firmly this time. I'm doing this to stop hurting myself. That landed. He blinked. My father shifted in his seat again but didn't speak. It was strange. In that moment I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of what they'd say. Not of what they'd think. Not even of losing them. Because somewhere along the way I had already lost them. Not to death. Not to distance. But to entitlement. To their constant belief that I was less valuable than the dreams they kept trying to build on my back. And I wasn't going to be the foundation for anyone else's broken tower again. I'm not your investor, I said quietly. I'm your daughter. And for once I'm going to act like I remember that. Nobody moved. No one said a word as I walked past them toward the door and opened it wide. You could hear the street outside. Birds, wind, life going on as usual. But inside everything had changed. Take care of yourselves, I added. Then I stood back. And watched them walk out. One by one, into a world that finally didn't include the version of me they thought they could control. They didn't slam the door behind them. They didn't curse me out or leave in a dramatic storm of rage like you might see in the movies. No. They just walked out in silence, and somehow that was heavier than anything they could have said. The silence after a storm always is. I stood in the doorway a few seconds longer than necessary, just breathing. Listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. It was fast but steady. Not panicked. Not broken. Just real. Then I closed the door. And I locked it. Not because I thought they'd come back. They wouldn't, not right away. I locked it because I needed the sound of that lock turning. I needed the finality of it. I needed to tell myself in no uncertain terms. This is over. You are safe now. I went back into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch, hands resting in my lap, not really sure what to do next. It was like the air had shifted, like something invisible had been yanked out of the room, and now I was left staring at this strange new space where pain used to live. I made myself a cup of tea. Aunt June's favorite blend, cinnamon and orange peel, still tucked in the tin she'd kept on her shelf for years. The scent brought back a dozen small memories. Her laugh. The way she'd tap her spoon 3 times before sipping. The way she used to tell me, peace is a door you open yourself. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. But that doesn't mean it was easy. The next few days were quiet but not peaceful. You see, when you've spent years of your life trying to please people who only love what you can give, there's an ache that doesn't leave immediately when you finally stop. It lingers. Questions you. It whispers things like, what if they never speak to you again? What if you're the problem? What if this was your last chance to fix the family? And that's the part no one tells you about healing. Sometimes it hurts worse than the wound. Because now you're awake. Now you're remembering all the times you accepted less, stayed quiet, smiled through disappointment and called it strength. But this time I didn't chase after their silence. I didn't text to check in. I didn't apologize just to smooth things over. I just let the silence be what it was. My parents didn't reach out that week. Not even a message. My brother posted some vague quote on social media about jealous people in your circle. Probably about me. I saw it. I didn't engage. I just blocked him. It was strange how light that felt. But the fallout didn't stop there. Word got around the extended family pretty quickly, like it always does. My cousin Ava called me 2 days later. She'd heard from her mom, who heard from someone else, that I had cut off my parents over some apartment issue. Is it true? She asked me softly. I told her the truth. Not the dramatized version. Not the gossip. Just the real story. And when I was done, there was a long pause. I braced for judgment. Instead, she said, I'm proud of you. I almost cried. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been quietly holding my breath at family dinners, feeling like a side character in my own life. Ava shared stories of similar treatment. The favoritism. The constant guilt. The subtle erasure. I had no idea she'd felt that too, we just never talked about it. That's the thing about emotional weight. It's heavy, but it's also isolating. You think you're carrying it alone until someone else finally says, me too. Over the next few weeks, I heard from others. Some surprised, some supportive, some too afraid to pick sides. That was okay. I didn't need them to pick a side. I just needed to finally stand on my own. I started doing small things around the apartment, things I'd always put off. I painted the hallway the soft moss green Aunt June once said reminded her of peace. I bought myself fresh flowers every Sunday. I took walks after dinner and let myself just exist. Without performance. Without pleasing. I stopped trying to earn space in other people's stories. And I started living in my own. There were still moments, of course. Birthdays that passed without a call, old habits that made me reach for my phone and hesitate. I still loved them in some ways. But I was no longer waiting for their love to make me whole. Because maybe the greatest act of love I could give to myself was freedom. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from roles I never agreed to play. Freedom from the lie that I had to give everything to deserve something. I sat on the balcony one evening, tea in hand, watching the city breathe beneath me. Slow, steady, alive. Just like I was learning to be. And I thought, this is what peace looks like. Not a dramatic ending. Not a triumphant victory. Just a quiet life I didn't have to shrink to fit into. And I smiled. Because for the first time in years I wasn't surviving their love. I was surviving without it. Spring came quietly that year. The air felt softer and for once I noticed. I wasn't rushing between obligations or bracing myself for the next demand. I was simply waking up, making coffee, opening the windows and letting life breathe again. The apartment didn't just feel like home anymore. It felt like proof. Proof that you can build something for yourself, even when everyone around you tried to make you doubt your worth. Proof that you can say no without being cruel and that saying no is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your future self. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping young women apply for scholarships, build resumes, learn to speak up in interviews. It wasn't a grand gesture. Just quiet work. But it meant something. Because I knew what it felt like to be unseen. And I knew how one real conversation, one safe space could change everything. Some of the girls asked me if I was close with my family. I'd smile and say, not in the way you'd think. And then I'd tell them something Aunt June used to say, you can love people and still leave them behind if they refuse to grow. And that's the truth. I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped losing myself to keep their love. It's not revenge. It's not bitterness. It's just clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is freedom. Freedom to decorate my life without asking if it fits someone else's taste. Freedom to sit in silence and not feel guilty for needing peace. Freedom to say, that's enough, and mean it. I've come to believe that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And we get to choose who walks through them. And when. Sometimes I still hear my father's voice in my head saying things like, it's family money, or, you owe us everything. But that voice has grown faint now. Smaller. Less believable. Because I don't owe anyone for simply existing. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a plan B. I'm not the afterthought holding the pieces together. I'm a woman with a name, a home, and a life she built with her own hands. And if you're watching this, if you've ever been made to feel like your love only matters when it's convenient for others, I hope you remember this. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need to apologize for keeping what was earned through your own struggle. And you certainly don't need to sell your future just to keep someone else's comfort alive. Sometimes the envelope isn't the beginning of conflict. It's the beginning of freedom.